Hello, everyone. Welcome to Scruffy Tales. I'm Scruffy, and this is the War Zone. Um, Now, with Trump as president, uh, who knows what the hell will happen in the world? I think it's safe to say that military aid for Ukraine has come into question from the United States, that is, and I mean, if Ukraine wants to fight on without American assistance, Europe really needs to step up. Because if Russia is allowed to move its borders west at the expense of another country, then we're entering dangerous times. It's legitimizing invasions. It's legitimizing superpowers doing what they want with smaller nations and stuff like that, right? And I think it's up to Europe to make sure that bullshit comes to an end, especially on our own turf. And there is a way, I think. It's not likely. I don't think it's going to happen, but I would like to see it happen. And that is something akin to what Russia and North Korea are doing, namely to do something similar to what Sweden did back in 1940 during the Winter War. Russia invaded Finland in 1939, and on day one of the invasion, Sweden opened recruitment offices across the country for volunteers that wanted to join up and fight for the Finns in Finland. On day one, this was obviously, everyone knew the war was coming, so Sweden was prepared. And what Sweden did was they gave 500 officers leave of absence from their normal duties to take charge of these volunteers. And they had screenings. They made sure no communists, no fascists, no Nazis were allowed to serve. And they also had a boot camp where they made sure you had the physically fit and, people of average intelligence taking part in this volunteer corps. And then there was the question of how do you equip them? Well, Sweden quickly arranged for charity to be gathered. These charity funds were given to Finland, and Finland then used the charity money to purchase military equipment from Sweden. And it just so happens that the money Finland used was enough to equip the 9,500 Swedes in the volunteer corps with military equipment, military hardware, military gear, uniforms, what have you. Enough of all of that to supply the 9,500 troops that Sweden was going to send to Finland. This was quite obviously a very thinly veiled plan concocted by Sweden, how to move the Swedish army into Finland and fight without officially going to war. Because the politicians in Sweden, they didn't want bombs falling on Swedish towns. They didn't want Swedish civilians dying needlessly. But they still wanted to help the Finns. So this is how they realized this is a way we can get the army into Finland at small scale, and then we can push in on another couple of thousand and then another couple of thousand. Unfortunately, Finland agreed to a ceasefire and peace talks before Sweden could move in more volunteers. But in essence, this was a very well-equipped Swedish infantry formation with artillery, anti-aircraft guns, mortars, machine guns, rifles, submachine guns, anti-tank weapons, armored vehicles, and what have you. And not only that, Sweden also moved a third of its air force to Finland. Planes, pilots, ground crew, ammunition, spare parts, fuel, you name it. A third of the Air Force was moved to Finland to fight the Russians. And so Sweden, again, this was made possible through charity and volunteers. In reality, Sweden moved its army and air force into Finland to help the Finns fight the Russian invasion. And I think Europe needs to do something similar in Ukraine. Each country needs to give 1,000, 2,000 troops, if not more, leave of absence, and they can do whatever they want, and, you know, magically they end up in Ukraine. And also, since all the countries are giving aid packages, these countries should also, in their aid packages, supply Ukraine with the equipment, with the vehicles, with everything needed to make sure that these soldiers that have now moved to Ukraine can be equipped according to their each country's army standards. So now you have a proper international legion equipped according to Western standards across Europe. With experienced soldiers, they understand tactics, they understand orders, they know what to do, they know how to handle these weapons and vehicles on an expert level, and they can now take part in the fighting as part of the Ukrainian army. This, of course, is not without risk, and it wasn't for Sweden either. Russia bombed Sweden on a number of occasions during World War II. A small town called Pajala. Russia dropped some 150 firebombs on that small town. They tried twice to bomb Luleå because they wanted an airfield in Luleå in the north of Sweden. And they also dropped bombs on the wider Stockholm area, the capital of Sweden. And blamed it on navigational error. You know, Sweden wasn't officially in the war, but, you know, Swedish troops were fighting in Finland, so the Russians, they felt they had to do something, so navigational error, and they ended up bombing several locations in Sweden. So if Europe were to do something like this, to sneak in troops into Ukraine and provide them sneakily with proper equipment, of course Russia will retaliate, and we will see sabotage across Europe, maybe even assassination attempts. They will try and disrupt our elections. They're already doing that, but, you know, they will try and divide Europeans and immigrants. They will try and increase right-wing xenophobia and stuff like that. And all of that. They will fuel those flames that will disrupt or may disrupt European society. That will happen. And people will suffer, people will get hurt, and some might even die. But can we let Ukraine fight on their own? For how long? And eventually, without American support, can Ukraine fight on? Or will they be pressured into accepting a peace where they surrender territory to Russia? Europe needs to step things up. And I think this is the way to go. It's an escalation. It's a dangerous escalation. Who knows what the next step will be? But something needs to be done. And I am in favor of Europe stepping up to the plate and doing what's needed in this war. Doing what's needed to help Ukraine win against Russian aggression. That's it. Bye.